Warriors are not born. Warriors are forged in the crucible of adversity. Warriors without fear are warriors without courage. We are men, destroying stigma and stereotypes. We are a band of brothers, because in brotherhood there is strength. Our weapons are strength, empathy, and honesty. We are mental health warriors, and this is our voice.
Do you have an inspiring mission? Are you willing to make a big impact? Do you have a challenge? I don't want an easy ride. Are you fun? And do you understand the power of commitment? Because if you do, my new coaching program, Serving Powerfully, is for you. And I want to show you how effective it can be by serving you powerfully. So here's what I'm offering. I'm offering you 2 hours of my undivided attention and focus where we can work together to create a transformative experience for you. That's it. No gimmicks, no tricks. All I ask is for you to bring an open heart and an open mind and a commitment to making change. And you will see how incredible a transformation we can make in your life in 2 hours. Learn more by going to servingpowerfully.com and let's get started together. I cannot wait. And if you love the Mental Health Warriors podcast, please support the show. You can share our episodes, or you can head over to patreon.com/mentalhealthwarriors and become a patron of the show. And that simply means supporting us with $1 or $2 per episode. You can cap your contribution per month, and you can cancel at any time. So if we suck or completely go off the rails, you don't have to worry about that. Thank you so much for your continued support. It means so much to us. It helps us cover our costs, but also reach a greater audience. For people who have experienced trauma, one of the greatest challenges can be how to create intimacy after the trauma happens. I mean, your idea of trust is shattered. You know, you've been put through something that's extremely challenging and difficult to deal with, and how to create human connections after that when you've been hurt by oftentimes a person who you thought you loved the most or you could trust the most. That is a huge challenge and something many people that I talk to face on a day-to-day basis. But it doesn't have to be that way. And that's why I love this conversation, and I think you're going to love it too, because Dr. Kat Smith tells us her own gripping story. Oh my God. And walks us through how she's healed from that and how she's learned to not only create intimacy in her own life, but how is helping other people create intimacy in their lives. And intimacy is so important. God, it's that feeling of connectedness with people, of feeling like your souls are intertwined, like there are no barriers between you, that you know you're getting the 100% real deal, that you're safe, that you're loved, that you're cared for, that you're supported, like all of those things. And so many people don't have that. And Dr. Kat Smith is really doing a wonderful job in helping people see how to create that. I actually stumbled across her randomly when I was I don't remember what I was looking for actually, but I came across a TED Talk she gave. And I think it's maybe 9 or 11 minutes long, but the amount of impact, and this is the hallmark of a wonderful, powerful speaker. The amount of impact she was able to cram into an incredibly short period of time was an inspiration to me, but I mean, allowed her to connect to the audience in an extremely important way. So I think you're going to love this conversation. Dr. Smith calls herself an entomologist, which is basically a doctor of an intimacy expert. She's a doctor of human sexuality, and she's on a mission to help women access the power of the P. So what does the P stand for? It stands for pleasure, persuasion, passion, and the list goes on and on. For years, she's been telling clients and audience members alike that men and women view sex differently. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. That is absolutely true. For men, intimacy is sex. For women, sex is just the tip of the iceberg. She's described as an honest, bold, and innovative thinker who provides unique perspectives for the intimate concerns of our time. Dr. Kat is a rare individual who views the struggles of relationships and offers solutions, and her goal is to help couples re-educate couples on the difference between sex and intimacy so that they can equally enjoy their relationship. She's been on all kinds of TV and media, and she's a rock star, basically. And I think that you're going to take so much away from this because remember, intimacy is not something that just happens. It's something that you actually have to actively create. And that's like with so much in our lives, right? We cannot sit idly by and be a bystander and hope that we create something different by watching the world go by. Be intentional, understand what you want to create, and then learn how to create it. It's a skill. And you know what? Overcoming some of the roadblocks that are preventing you from being intimate is a skill. Learning the actual intentional actions you can take to be intimate is a skill. And this is going to be not only a wonderful storytelling session, but it's going to be one of the things I love the most on the Mental Health Warriors podcast, and that's a skill building session so you can walk away with some tools to incorporate more intimacy in your life. So, without further ado, enjoy this episode with Dr. Kat Smith. Dr. Smith, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jason. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, me too. You know, I was watching your TED Talk, and I want you to understand the intellect of the person you're talking to right now. So you mentioned that you're an entomologist, and then you clarified that that's not an entomologist. And I actually didn't know what that was either. So I had to look that up. So it was unintentionally educational for me. Let's put it that way. So can you tell our audience what an entomologist is?
Okay. So if you look up entomologist, look it up with an I instead of an E. Spelled with an E is a bug expert. But I am an intimacy expert. Therefore, I call myself an entomologist.
Wonderful. Now, is that a term that you came up with, or is that an official profession, I guess?
I came up with that and kind of started making sure I was branding that term.
Wonderful. So I love the topic of intimacy, and I'm looking forward to getting into your backstory a little bit. But I think that from my experience, especially dealing with a lot of men, and so in our mental health warriors community, one of the things that really comes up a lot is lack of intimacy. And I've experienced this in my own life. I mean, my first wife was diagnosed with a mental illness, and she ended up taking her own life. But what I really didn't understand was one of the things I grieved the most was the loss of intimacy. And I didn't understand that at the time. I just thought I grieved. I don't know. I was more focused on, the loss of my relationship or the fact that my relationship had changed so much. Do you find that people don't, I guess, understand or consciously understand the power of intimacy?
Yes. And that is why I made it my focus, because there's so much confusion about the term intimacy. A lot of people think intimacy equals sex. And sex is a component of intimacy, but it's the physical expression you feel. You're expressing those feelings of love, desire, passion, attraction. That's what sex really is. And yes, for procreation, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about emotions and feelings and that connectedness that you feel with an individual. Okay, so intimacy, when I define intimacy is affection, it's trust, it's respect, it's nurturing, it's care, it's communication, it's all of these wonderful things. And like I said, yes, sex is a component. Also, passion is a component. But if you don't have all of these ingredients that I call intimacy as the foundation of your relationship, the sex is not going to be the glue that keeps it together.
Yeah, and I think in my experience, I've noticed that the more vulnerable I am and the more honest I am, the more intimate my relationship becomes. And I'd love to talk to you about how the relationship between fear and intimacy, because I think for me, I had some things happen to me, just like many of people have. And I think that I was holding on to this fear of letting myself become fully vulnerable, just for fear of wanting to protect something. I'm not even sure what it was. Maybe protect myself from rejection or whatever. But does fear or vulnerability, how do those things relate to intimacy?
Well, being intimate with someone, when you think about someone even being in your intimate space, that's a very close proximity. So when you're intimate with someone, you are opening up to allowing them into your world, into your space, into your thoughts, into your heart. So it's normal to want to protect yourself from anybody invading that and causing any kind of disruption. Okay, so the fear is real because when you're free to love and to be yourself and to give and receive, all this wonderful stuff that love is supposed to be about, then there's nothing, nothing clouds your world. But if somebody goes in there and wrecks your idea of what love is, because you've thought, oh, this person loves me, and you've trusted them, and they've done something to hurt you, and it may not have been intentional, but it obscures your definition of what love is. So of course you want to retract, and you're like, okay, I got to watch this because this could happen again, and that doesn't feel very well. I don't like the way that feels, and it can cause you to not trust, to not want anybody to touch you or anybody to get close. So the feeling is normal, but I want to go back and just kind of give you some backstory on intimacy, because intimacy begins at infancy. Okay, at infancy. We know that babies can die if they are not held and touched and loved on and have that feeling of being safe and cared for. Okay? We stop giving that impression to boys as young as 4 years of age. We tell them, oh, big boys don't cry, and get from under your mom. You're a big boy now. Go out and sow your wild oats. All of this stuff, right? So we push boys more into a physical expression of accomplishment, we give them all of this attention and applause when they do something physical, like they win the trophy, they get whatever from their physical achievements, but they don't do it on the intimate or emotional side of their lives. When a boy starts to show any kind of emotion, they tell him to suck it up, and he does not even develop his emotional voice. So when in adulthood, when women are crying and saying, "You don't understand me, you don't talk to me," but all this stuff, it's like, that does not compute. That does not compute.
Right.
Because you're like going, why is she so emotional? Hey, man, wait, that's, you're going a little crazy here. Because he does not even have the vocabulary, the voice to communicate what all that emotional mumbo jumbo is to them. Okay? So when you have not even developed your emotional self, it's hard for you to totally allow intimacy to be a part of your world, because you can't have one without the other.
That's really interesting. Is there such a concept as like self-intimacy, or I don't know if that's the right word, but being in touch, completely in touch with your own emotional landscape, I guess?
Yes, I don't think there's an actual term for it, but I think it starts with self-love and self-preservation and self-worth and self-confidence. You hear these motivational speakers talking about, you have to tell yourself and, get out there and do it. It's hard for someone who has suffered any kind of trauma or any kind of setback. It can be something that was said to them that just mentally just kind of disrupted their whole vision for what life was going to hold for them. It starts with infancy. And when you give that child all it needs to feel loved and cared for and nurtured and respected, and you communicate to them and teach them how to communicate, and allow them to develop their emotions, then they are a solid, whole individual. But when you're telling them, to go out and be all that they can be, and they can achieve all their goals in life, but it's empty because they have no emotional connections that are built. It's kind of one-sided. It's one-sided kind of living.
Wow, that really resonates with me, because that was basically how I grew up. So, and it took me into my 40s to fundamentally understand what you're saying, and to realize how much of life that I was missing in a way. And yeah, I've been reading lately about social isolation and how important that is. And I would think that, so for example, I was reading a study the other day that, social mammals will choose physical pain over social isolation. And I think that raising boys this way, for example, that must contribute to a sense of isolation.
Yes, it does. Because every time, naturally when someone feels something, it is expressed. Okay? And then all of a sudden you're telling them, no, you're not supposed to feel that, and you're not supposed to, and don't do that, and that's not what boys do, and men don't do that. Then all of his life he's been suppressing his natural, God-given feelings to mold and shape himself the way society and everyone around him tell him that he's supposed to be. So naturally, he's not going to be able to communicate to a woman, because a woman was totally raised a different way. She was saying, feel and cry and, feel for others, embrace others, and hold, hug each other and all this stuff. Men just recently started to embrace each other. They put the fist in front of each other and, do the hand around the back with the clenched fist thing in between them. But real hugs and embracing with men, that's no, because, you don't want to be, thought about being gay, or you don't want to,
Sure.
Somebody, it's all these other fears that come in. Or if you do show any sensitivity or any emotion, then you're going to be called all these horrible names, saying that you're basically weak. And no man wants that either. So we have created this monster because we've told men and boys that we want you to go and conquer the world and still be gentlemen and protect us and be the providers. And, we want this image of, the man, but then we don't want you to be emotional. Okay. Cause don't show your weakness. But in a relationship, you can, in any way, you can be the whole person that you need to be, as long as you understand it. If you don't understand it and you allow your emotions to show, and then you just like break all down and fall apart, then people are going to go, oh, okay, we need to huddle around and, you got to be a man. Come on, suck it up, because then people are seeing that you're not in emotional control. But if you are in a situation where you understand the emotion and where it's coming from, you better can handle it. But if you let this volcano erupt because you've been trying to suppress it all of these years, then you may not get the outcome that you want. And that's why I'm trying my best to re-educate people on emotional development and intimacy. Because, there's a big chunk of that pie of your life that's not being either utilized or being missed because you're not able to have that voice to be able to communicate what you need, what you desire, understand someone else who's speaking in an emotional context. You'll be able to understand it. And then that way you can formulate your responses and your reactions to that, because you're empowered by understanding it.
One of the things I tell guys a lot is, you know how you are when you get drunk with your buddies and you're hugging each other and you're going, I love you, bro, and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's just, you want to be able to do that sober. Like, if you can do that sober, your relationships will actually be a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so sad. And I'm such a hugger. But that was a transition for me as well. Because, you saw my TED Talk, but a little bit of, my background is I'm a survivor of molestation and 2 date rapes. Okay, so there was a time in my life where people touching me was, no, don't touch me, don't touch me, no hugging, don't even look at me because I felt you were undressing me. And the thing is, the ironic part of that is I modeled for years. Okay, so, but I was able to take on a different personality. I became someone else and did the runway, got off or got in front of the camera, did my job, whatever. And, but then for years, I was a depressed mess behind closed doors. So I had to bring myself out of that and try to understand what was going on with me. So I took the initiative to learn. What are these mood swings? What is going on with me? I read and I tried to understand. Then I went to therapy and I got the help that I needed. However, I was at a point where it was like I did not understand what was happening until someone showed me. You have been trying to suppress these natural feelings that resulted from the sexual trauma that you experienced as a child. So we all have stuff, like you said, that we've experienced. But once we can acknowledge and understand, that empowers us to be able to make different changes and different steps, take different steps in our lives.
So you talked about in your TED Talk how you created, and you just alluded to this a minute ago, but you created this persona of the warrior goddess. And I think that's a really, I did something similar. Hope mine wasn't really a goddess, but it was, my own persona of what I thought I needed to be in order to achieve the things I thought I wanted to achieve. But was that a conscious choice, or was that almost like a subconscious self-defense mechanism?
Well, it was kind of by choice, but she came about as a defense mechanism because I became a caretaker for my younger brothers and sister. I did not want them to experience what I had been experiencing, and my mother did not want to do anything about the abuser. Okay, so while I was in her household under her care, I had to take the reins, so to say, and say, okay, enough. I threatened him with a knife and slept with it under my pillow for years. Okay, and I also became a caretaker, like I said, from my younger siblings because I didn't want them to experience what I experienced. So in that, I kind of took on this warrior goddess because once it's my mother's husband who was my abuser. He was, just brutalizing one of my younger brothers, while he was trying to run up the stairs away from him. And he had just a really thick leather belt. And he was beating him, and I grabbed a bat and I went behind him, and for every lick he gave my brother, I gave him one, and I kept telling him, leave him alone, leave him alone. And so out of that, I just noticed this difference in me that I can be strong and I can stop this brutality that was going on. I can stop the abuse that was going on. So that's kind of the little trigger that gave me the warrior goddess, but I used to read a lot. I would climb a tree next to our house and get up there with a cat that I had. I always had a cat, but I had a cat, and I would get up in the tree and I'd read these books, and it was always about a strong woman who defied the queen, or all this stuff. Victoria Holt was the line of books and I had every one of her books, and so it was always this really strong woman, and so I knew that I can embody that, those characteristics that those women had. And then I took the reins, but then I left home at 17. So I wasn't sure what really was going on in the house, but I mean, going over there, I just limited my time going over there.
Well, I can't even imagine what that experience must have been like, watching your brother be beaten and then beating your wife's, your mother's, was it your mother's husband?
Yes,
with a baseball bat? My goodness. So and then you mentioned you were sexually assaulted a few more times. I didn't know that. Did your experience, I'm trying to think of a way to word this without in any way trying to imply that you did something to, create it, I guess. But did your experience as a child contribute to that happening somehow, like with the way you were living your life or the people you were associating with, or maybe, I don't know. Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes, I know exactly what you're asking. Yes and no, because you never want to blame the victim, okay?
Right.
So this is what I determined for my situation. I said, wow, this keeps happening. And the 2 date rapes, that was not even the end of it, okay? There was other situations where I met a guy, he came over to my house, and he masturbated by looking at my feet. And I mean, I walked back over with glasses of wine and about to sit him down, and I see he's exposed himself. And sorry,
that's okay.
My office beeper. And so here we are about to sit down and enjoy some conversation, and I look over and he's exposed himself. And he's sitting there and he's like, and then I'm like he's looking at my feet and he's masturbating. And I'm going, wow. So anyway, just to say that there's all of these situations that have happened. So I had to say, okay, the least common denominator is you. Okay, so what are you attracting to yourself? So I took a more spiritual look at what was happening. And I said, why am I attracting this? What kind of energy am I putting out there? And in the TED Talk, I say it's almost like I had a neon sign over my head saying victim.
Right.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like you, because my mom never addressed the issue with my abuse, never did anything to show me that I was worth her saying, no, this is wrong, stop it, don't touch her again, okay? I was a victim, and I remember going to church and thinking God would never do anything for a nasty little girl like me because I was dirty. What was happening with me was wrong. I felt dirty. I felt wrong. I felt like nobody would forgive me and nobody loved me because my whole idea of love was shattered. And so I go into my teenage years and my adulthood thinking that the only thing that men want from me is sex. Okay. I'm not worth anything else. I'm a dirty little girl. I had no self-worth, no self, my femininity, my womanhood, all of those wonderful, delicious aspects of being a woman was totally just kind of demolished. I was just a woman, working as a woman, and the feminine qualities I just never really embodied in my personal life. I could take it on in persona as a model, but I did not want anybody looking at me when I was not doing my job. And so I would get into these relationships or these situations with these guys who, you know, would approach me and say, you know, hey. And I always tell women that attention is not necessarily affection. So when somebody's giving you attention, you just got to kind of really look at the why they're giving you the attention and just kind of get the cues of really why they're talking to you. So I had none of that experience to be able to decipher, you know, what was a safe, okay, I'm going to use the word safe, a safe date or not. And so I would just get into these situations with these men and they would do these things. And then I would just kind of go, well, I guess it's my fault because I just let them, you know, kind of thing. So in a sense, yeah, I was allowing it. I never stood up and say, this is never going to happen to me again until I educated myself and understood and I got the help that I need to say that, no, what happened to you was wrong. You had nothing to do with his perversion. You just happened to be the one he took it out on. So when someone is dealing with something traumatic like that, they have to be able to understand that they are not the cause of it. They have to seek help so they can get a different perspective, because on your own, your perspective is going to be, you're going to blame yourself, you're going to have guilt, you're going to be confused, you're just not going to know how to steer yourself clear of that pattern that you're in. And it wasn't just me. My sisters have also gone on to be in abusive relationships, and it just, you know, promiscuity was just rampant. So when the pattern was set, we just kind of followed and went on with our lives and not knowing that we could change that, alter that pattern, kind of write our new script for life.
So was there a particular watershed moment or milestone when you realized that you needed to make a change, or was it sort of a gradual awakening?
Well, the pivotal one was, you know, after this awful date, I was in my apartment and I was just bawling, as I did on many occasions in the evening. Once I closed the door, I was a totally different person. Oh, I was a jokester during the day. Nobody even would have thought that I had any problems. I was laughing and cracking jokes, and, you know, I was the funny one. But when I got home and closed the door, I was a totally different person. I hardly came out. I just you know, depressed. And then I finally said, okay, something is wrong and I got to get some help. So at the time I was going to a church that had services that were available. And so they referred me to another church member who was a therapist. And I get in there and I cried the entire first hour. About our first appointment, the whole hour, I just sit there and cry. I could not even utter a word. I couldn't tell him a thing. And on the next one, I was able to finally say something, and we talked, and he, you know, guided me to some great healing. And he was a great guy. But then, kind of right in the you know, as everything was moving uphill, he moved to a different state, and I got referred to someone else. And I walk into the room and I started talking to him because I felt comfortable at that point. I started talking to him. He says, well, what were you wearing?
Oh my God.
I said, wow. And it was then that I knew, okay, it's kind of like that song, The Greatest Love of All. And, you know, I can't depend on someone else. I got to depend on me. So I said, I'm going to take control of my life from now on. I'm going to decide who I'm going to tell my story to, because it's hard. When you start telling your story of your abuse, a lot of people can't even handle it. They want to tell you, oh, that happened so many years ago, get over it, and all this. And I was even fired after one of the date rapes. I told my supervisor what had happened to me, and she goes, well, we won't be needing you any longer. On the spot, I got fired.
Wow.
So, you know, you just kind of take all of these little, you know, all of these experiences, and you just kind of go, okay, all right, my mom didn't do anything. Here's a supervisor that's telling me I'm fired from my job, and the just all of the things that were happening. You just kind of go, wow, is this how life's supposed to be? And you have to decide. You have to decide, no, it's not going to be that way for me. I'm going to rewrite the script here.
And you definitely did. So how did you get to the point where, coming from a history where there was such a profound lack of intimacy, to make this your life's work?
I guess because I've always been such a caring and loving person. I mean, if one of my siblings was getting a spanking, and when I was little, very little, I would just run and I would hold on to the person's leg and just, get in the way of the belt and just cry and say, don't spank them, and I would just be like crying, and they would pull me out of the way, or they would go give me some of it, But I was always the one that would run home from school and run and kiss my mom. And I was always the one hugging and kissing on everybody. So I was always a loving, caring child. And I enjoyed that openness and that feeling that I'm connected to people. And it did take a lot of nudging to go and get my doctorate. I'm going to tell you that right now, because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go back to school. But I did it. But just wanting to, well, first of all, knowing that because I came out of my situation, plural situations, with a sane mind, and I needed to do something with that. I needed to be a voice for those who could not communicate and articulate how it feels to be violated, betrayed, abused, or suffered such traumatic, experiences. So I said, okay, God, if you're going to put this in my lap, I'm going to take it and I'm going to do something with it. So I met in one of the jobs that I was working at, I met a wonderful, wonderful woman named Gracie Mason. I will sing her praises until I'm gone. And Gracie reminded me so much of my grandmother, but she was going through a very hard time where she was losing her husband to cancer. And every day, Gracie still had a smile on her face, and she was the one who broke me of that not wanting to be hugged. Because every time I came back to work, and she would run, oh, Katrina, she called me Katrina, and she would give me this big mama hug, and I just melted to her bosoms, because it was just like you felt all this love just flowing, and oh my God, how could you not just love that? I had this awakening in my soul from her just embracing me and knowing that she was going through all of this, but she had a little bit of love and kindness for me. And she's the one that was pivotal in that. And I said, I wanna be like Gracie. I want to be able to give people that love that they need. I may be the only one that smiles at them or gives them a hug or acknowledges, that they even exist. But I'm going to do it because I know how it helped me.
Well, one of the things that I find, I got an echo there. One of the things I find really interesting is when people use what has been, I guess it's a better way to say it is it's just so beautiful to see when people realize that the greatest struggle or their greatest source of shame or whatever happens to be is actually the potential source of their greatest contribution to the world. Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry. I don't know. It's just beautiful to see that, because some people are not able to do that, right? I guess they carry that boat anchor around for the rest of their life, while other people like yourself have turned it around and used it as a source of good. So I just find that it's always so inspiring to hear everybody's own unique version of that story. So
yeah, you know what I think with that though, Jason, I think we try to run from it.
Right.
I think a lot of people are given that gift And I'm going to call it a gift because, yes, all of the things that I've experienced, I would not wish that on anyone. But for it to make me the woman that I am today, I have to, it's part of it. It's what made me who I was. But I tried to run from it. I was afraid in this work that I would not be able to hear someone's stories without breaking down and just being a sobbing, just a sobbing mess here in my office while they were trying to get help. Then I would be a mess, right? And because early on I said, maybe I'll be a social worker. Maybe I'll do that kind of work. Excuse me. But when I would see commercials of children needing to be adopted or, feed the children or abused animals. And I was just a mess. I could not hardly see a commercial. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this kind of work. I gotta figure out what's the emotional triggers that are causing me to be so emotional. So what I figured out is that I was trying to run from the healing that not only that I needed, but that I could give to other people. There's that thing about repeat exposure. Repeat exposure is so healing. Don't run from or try to stifle or smother what has happened to you. Just remember it. Bring it up. Talk about it. Tell somebody about it. Because you know what? The more you do, the less effective it is. And you will numb those triggers and you will become stronger in your story and the delivery of it and the receiving of people's responses. It's very inspirational. I'll call it that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I see a lot is I talk to people, and it's mostly guys I talk to about this, but it's guys in the mental health warriors community that I run, but they've experienced trauma, and it's amazing how many people that are in that community have experienced trauma as a kid, and they have a very hard time facing that, or they don't understand that the pain they're feeling right now as adults, where they might be saying, I've got a wife and kids, but I suck as a father and life is difficult and I'm not a good husband, and they're in intense pain, but they're not either unaware that there's a thread that runs through their whole life that started at that trauma they experienced as a kid, or that they're just too afraid to face it because they're afraid of, I guess, opening up that can of worms. I mean, is that something I'm assuming that's something that must be fairly common.
Yes, it is. And again, when you were mentioning how, the fear, because if they don't understand it, the fear comes in as like, oh, but if I go down that path and the emotions take control, that I'm going to start crying and that's going to change, everybody's going to think I'm weak. I'm going to, all of this stuff starts to kind of invade the idea that they can start or take the steps towards resolving whatever the issues are. I would say if they could do anything, I want to give this to anyone listening. If you're having problems at home and you think that you're not being a good father, you're not being a good husband, try affection. Affection is an everyday thing. It's not the rubbing on the shoulders when you want to have sex. So then she pulls away and she's resentful because the only time you're affectionate is when you want sex. Okay? Think about that. And when your children want to sit on your lap or want to kiss you or hug you or daddy, spend time with you, give them that. Show affection. Affection daily. And it may be uncomfortable in the beginning, but keep doing it. Look at how you are reacting to affection. When someone hugs you or when someone wants to give you a kiss, a lot of guys kind of stiffen up and they put their chest out like, yeah, okay, okay, I got you. No. Really feel the sensory things that are going on and the thoughts that you're having about the experience. Then you can isolate, oh, I see, I'm always going to that thought. Then you can see where it all, the roots of it are.
One of the reasons I love having conversations like this is because it basically in every single one, I learned something new. And I never really realized how much, like if somebody experiences trauma as a kid, it's almost like or any kind of trauma really. I mean, that they don't resolve or heal from. It's that not being able to admit to somebody else, or even maybe to yourself, how much you're hurting and the feelings that you're feeling for all the reasons that we've talked about already. But that in and of itself, it's like a double whammy, because you'll never be able to create the level of intimacy in your relationships that would actually allow you to heal, right? Because you're hiding this, or you're not willing to admit or confront this fundamental aspect of who you are.
Exactly.
Or what happened to you.
Yeah, because there's a chunk of your life that you are blotting out of the picture. Every time, if you look at, a puzzle that's framed, each experience of your life is a piece of that puzzle. And the picture is not complete yet because you're still alive. And you're getting these experiences and you're putting this puzzle together. But if you don't want to acknowledge what has happened to you in your life, those pieces of the puzzle are still going to be missing from that picture, from your life picture, because it's part of you. It doesn't have to be the stain in your life. It can be part of this beautiful picture of your life. And if you acknowledge it and you take those pieces and you look at them and go, okay, I see where this fits. So Maya Angelou says something, and you can really relate it to this. When people show you who they are, believe them. Well, when life gives you pieces of the puzzle, put them in place. Put them in there, but then realize what they are, understand them so that they don't blur the image of the whole picture. It doesn't have to, it's like getting a water stain on something. It doesn't have to spread throughout the whole picture or, mess up your whole sheet of paper or your the text on your paper. You can blot that out, let it dry, and it'll be fine. You can still read what's there or see what's there. But a lot of times we try to take that part of our life and we want to blot it out or wad it up or stuff it down, bury it. We try to do all kinds of things to it, but it's like stinky garbage. If you don't get rid of it right, it's gonna have a stench and it's gonna come back at you.
I love your analogies. They're great. So to bring it back to something we kind of talked about at the beginning, where we talked about, at the age of 4 years old, boys start getting this message about suck it up and what strength looks like. And well, what impact does that have on girls? Because girls must also be getting the same message about what it means to be a boy that boys are getting, whether directly or through osmosis, just by being around it. So as women mature, or girls mature into adulthood, do they want men to be emotionally in tune with themselves, or do they also find that to be weak?
Well, a certain degree of it, they find it to be weak because it's how they approach it. If a man is just being sensitive and aware and actually allows her to see that he's human just like everybody else, if she provides him a space and for him to be, open and honest and vulnerable, and don't accuse him of being weak or make him feel bad, make him feel that he's inadequate as a man because he shows his sensitive side, then he will be able to grow in that. He will feel safe in sharing that. But a lot of women today, they are verbally abusive to a man who shows sensitivity, but yet and still they want a man who's going to be a man's man. Okay? They want a man's man, but they want someone who understands them and that can be sensitive and open up and all of that stuff. So if some men who are sensitive men, I have a questionnaire that I put out there. What kind of man is your lover? And the sensitive man, you have to allow him. He's like the poet, okay? And he is the one that's going to tell you these beautiful words and everything, and share all of these wonderful feelings that he has. But he also needs time alone to be able to process all of that, because he's still a man and he's still kind of questioning, how strong am I? Am a man? Am I putting out the right presence and image and all of that? But he's also going to be the one that's going to be more affectionate and is going to really want to talk about your feelings and listen to you. And when he's doing that, and he might be trying to solve your problems, you can't talk bad to him and make him feel that he's not wanted and needed. And a lot of women don't understand that. Your independence should not threaten your relationship, ladies. Your independence should not threaten your relationship. You can have it all. You can have your success in your career, and you can also have love that's healthy, it's loving, it's caring and nurturing and full of respect, and all of these characteristics that I say that is intimate. It's kind of like the character that on Devil Wears Prada, she was just hard ass on, at the job. Mm-hmm. But then when you saw her with her husband, she was like, oh, well, honey, all this, because she understands there's balance in all things. Let him be the man in your life and you be the woman in his life. And both of you know what you're best at, so you can balance it out. And then don't make either one feel inadequate in any way. Make them feel appreciated and needed and loved and support them in what they're passionate about. All of these things. You can't break somebody down thinking controlling them is going to make them love you more or want to stay with you. You got to be that nurturing. I always tell women, men want mom with benefits. And I know that sounds creepy. But think about it. Since intimacy begins at infancy, his first interaction with intimacy, all that stuff, that nurturing, care, and support, and all of that wonderful stuff, except for the sex, mom was giving to him. So he wants that out of his woman, but he wants the sex too. And you don't have to treat him like a child. I'm not saying treat him like a child. I'm saying give him all of those wonderful things and be able to communicate what you need to him as well and balance out the relationship.
So I'm trying to think of the best way to word this question. Do you have, when you work with I'm assuming you work with couples, is that true?
Yes, Mm-hmm.
Do you find, or does it happen where as you kind of peel back the onion with people and people get more in touch with their own emotions and understanding who they are, how does that impact the relationship from the perspective of people saying, wow, you're actually quite a different person than the person, or we are different people than the people we presented to each other when we first got together? Like, is that an issue that comes up that people need to work through?
Yeah, because the first thing is like, oh, you've changed.
Right.
Well, hopefully so. We are supposed to evolve. We're supposed to grow together. We're supposed to, just evolve as an individual. So as a couple, that you're supposed to grow together also. But I think what happens in relationships is that all of the other responsibilities and things happen, come into play. I always give the illusion, if you're looking at a fabric woven together, when you are getting into a relationship, you're trying to weave all of your stuff with all of their stuff. And sometimes there's like kinks, and you gotta take out the needle and weave that part together, by hand because it takes time, it takes understanding, it takes compromise. Couples get together, and I say right now, couples are emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted because we're constantly engaged, and we don't devote the same amount of time and energy and care to our relationships as we do Game of Thrones.
I love Game of Thrones, by the way, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, our TV shows, Scandal or Dancing with the Stars, whatever. We are set on, I gotta set the DVR and I've got to binge watch and I got to do all this stuff and it's coming on tonight and you talk about it with friends and all this. And that's like when it comes to your relationship, most of what you hear is like, Johnny, he went out with his friends last night and came home drunk again, and it's like, well, the words you're putting out, like this hostility towards Johnny because he went out to have a good time. Why is he going out to have a good time? Why don't you make a good time with him at home? Go out and have fun with him. Okay, couples don't set aside any, regular date nights. I've been with Tom, my husband, for 15 years. Now, we've only been married for one because we said we finally might as well do this. We've been together so long. But we knew we were very committed to each other. So there was no issues about getting married or not. But we've been together and I would say out of the 15 years, 12 of them, we started having a regular date night. So Friday nights are our date night. And we don't let anything get in the way of that. We spend quality time together. And just the other day, we drove to Nebraska to see the eclipse. And while in the car for 10 hours, we were talking and everything. And I told him, I said, babe, over the course of time, I have noticed such a big change in you. You've really changed. And so we were talking about that and we were seeing how each other change. And we were talking about what he likes about me and what I like about him. And it's good to have those conversations because we're growing together. And we hear about some of the drama in some of our friends' lives and we just kind of go, wow, But we communicate, we appreciate each other. We tell each other thank you. And he's such a gentleman. He'll go and get the groceries out of the car. I'll carry anything that I have. And, even if my handbag, he'll carry my handbag. It's like he has my care and, everything that's first to him. And the same thing with him. When he comes home, I'm a very domestic person. I love cooking and everything. I want to make sure that, babe, you need anything because I got you. And he's the same way. You need anything, I got you. But a lot of times if we got kids, you're like, the kids got to do all this stuff. But no, you can tell the kids, just like you tell the kids to do their homework, you tell the kids, mommy and daddy going on a date. You got to, trade off kids with another couple that has kids, okay? You take my kids this night as a sleepover. We'll take your kids and you can have a date on another night. So there's a way to be able to afford, you don't have to spend any money. You can go to a park, make yourself a picnic, whatever. You have no excuse to not spend some quality time together. That way you can address any concerns that you have, and try again, make affection a daily thing and watch how you talk to people. Don't talk down to anyone you love. Build them up. Don't tear them down.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's almost like I love what you're saying about really having to make an investment in intimacy. And it's almost like a stock market analogy where it does compound on itself. And I find this with my own wife because we do a lot of the similar things. And it's the intimacy, the level of intimacy never stops deepening. So because as you grow as people, and I don't know, there's still barriers that are, even after many years, there's still barriers that are dissolving. Maybe even things I didn't know that there were there. And I think as we move deeper into intimacy, it creates the courage to facilitates the courage to have even more open conversations. And I don't know, it's just like this never ending journey into a better place. And sometimes I feel like, I've said this to her, we'll be lying beside each other. I'm like, I actually feel like I'm in, like, not physically, but like, I feel like I'm inside you right now somehow. Like there's like no barrier between us. And man, that feeling is incredible.
Isn't it a beautiful thing? It is. Once you feel that that person has really got you, they understand. It's like you meld into that one. It's like, it's a beautiful experience. But if you look at, okay, and I try to use a lot of analogies, as you mentioned earlier. But if you look at when, okay, so if you look at the veins that go through your body, if you prick you get an infection in one part of your body and it gets in the bloodstream, it's going to like go through those veins, right? It's going to try to go through the channels of your body, through the veins. That your antibodies are trying to dissolve that invader. Well, it can sit dormant. Some infections can sit dormant in your body. Okay, once it gets in. So just think about this as you're dissolving. So the antibodies are like, okay, you were sitting dormant, but I'm going to conquer you, and it's doing its job. So it's killing off all of those dormant cells that are trying to stay in your body. So as it clears that path, that blood can flow freely, right? So here you are dissolving all of that intimate baggage, all of that trauma that has happened. And because it splinters out, and people have alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, suicide attempts. They disregard their health. They go, they promiscuity. They all of these different things can happen in adulthood as a result of trauma. So when you think about, the more you allow yourself to be intimate and be trusting and dissolve that fear and all that baggage that came with the trauma, everything flows freely and flows easily, and it just impacts your heart in a positive way.
Oh, that's beautifully put. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, and is about maybe a different perspective on intimacy. So I'll tell you my experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I've noticed that as I became more vulnerable about sharing my own personal story and all the, not the heroic version of the story, but like all the warts and all the crazy mistakes that I've made along the way, what I did was I started to create these relationships in my professional life that were more intimate. They were more real. The people started talking to me about things that I never would have expected them to talk to me about, because I went first basically, and I made it a safe place. And what I noticed was I became vastly more effective as a professional and a leader. And because, when people feel an intimate human connection with you, they will basically run through a wall for you, right? I mean, you guys, when you talk about the things that are truly the most important, it makes talking about the things that are important at work much, much easier. And one of the things I like to tell guys is, this is not just about sharing. This is about intimacy and vulnerability really is about more than sharing your feelings. It makes you vastly more powerful and effective and able to create an enduring legacy. So don't look at it as, I got to sit on the couch and cry. Look at it as like, I will be able to rally people around me, and we will together be able to get things done that we never would have been able to get done otherwise.
That is so true. Hold on, I have to cough so you can edit this out. Excuse me. Also, what you do is now, even though you may not be aware of it, in your professional life, you have this persona you're trying to put out there, this image you're trying to portray. And sorry, I have to clear my throat.
No, it's okay.
And with that, when you show your cards, you take off your mask, and people see who you really are, man, That is powerful. You shed pounds. So you're not worried about who sees who you are anymore. So now you can take that energy of trying to hide and you can put it towards achieving successes.
Yeah. Well, the phrase I always say is when you lay down your shield, you become invincible. I really I believe that. So, well, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for your insights and for, first of all, telling your story to our audience and your insights on intimacy. I know that there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast. They're going to benefit greatly from it. So for people who want to learn more about you or find out what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can go to my site at drkatsmith.com. That's drkatsmith.com. And also I have an online school, and they can take online classes. They can navigate from the site to that. And I have my podcast, Intimate Pleasures Podcast. So I talk about all kinds of stuff on there. So they can find everything else about me on that site.
Wonderful. And we'll link to all of that goodness in the show notes page for easy access. Dr. Smith, thank you so much for being a guest on the Mental Health Warriors podcast.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me.
And thank you very much, Dr. Kat Smith. I really enjoyed that conversation. And man, as a parent, listening to you tell the story of your younger years, childhood and teenage years is just, it's just gripping, and I always think about how many kids really struggle and really have challenges they have to face. So for you to deal with those challenges, overcome them, and teach people how to overcome the challenges they have faced, what a gift. So honored to have you on the show, and can't wait to continue following your work. And thank you for everything you're doing. And I'll end this podcast like I end every single podcast, and will continue to end every single podcast for as long as I'm doing this show, which I think is going to be a long damn time because I like it. So listen, if you struggled, I want you to know that I have struggled too. And if you ever want to talk to me, I will not judge you. Until next time, my beautiful, beautiful army of mental health warriors.